Like why? Why? What's happening?
안녕하세요, 김민kohe, 박Kimi입니다. Hi, this is Kimi Park from 김민kohe, and today we are reviewing this book by Olly Richards.
So this is the intermediate short stories in Korean. Read for pleasure at your level and learn Korean the fun way. I'll be talking both about the book and the audiobook, so bear with me. Let's start by a short presentation of the book. Olly Richards is a very well-known British polyglot. He has a YouTube channel that I'm subscribed to and watch quite regularly. This is a series of books available in a lot of different languages, and I was really excited to finally get my hands on one to finally discover what it's worth. The book starts with an introduction about the author, Olly Richards. Then you have an introduction praising the merits of this book, which are rich linguistic content in different genres, interesting illustration, shorter story broken down into chapters, text written especially at your level, special learning aids, which are the summary, the vocabulary list, and the comprehension questions. Then you have a note on how to read effectively, of which I think the most important points are that you must accept that you might not understand everything that you're reading, and making a note of a word that you don't know, and continue reading the story, or at least the chapter, until the end before you check. Trying to guess what the word means before looking for the translation straight away. Then there is an extremely short note on how to read Korean, which personally I find kind of redundant because this is supposed to be a book for intermediate, so the fact that you would be saying that the verbs are at the end of a sentence is just useless at this level. And then it explains the 6 steps reading process. Look at the illustration, read the chapter title, try to think about what it's about. Then read the whole chapter without stopping, use the summary to see if you understood everything right, then go back, read the whole chapter for the second time, trying to focus on details that you might have not understood on the first read. Then read once again the summary, check the vocabulary list, and try to do the comprehension questions, and try to see if you've understood everything. You might reread the chapter a final time or move on to the next chapter in the story. And only once you have read an entire short story, you can first of all congratulate yourself for having finished it. Second, go back and try to study the problematic parts. This book contains 8 short stories. The first one is divided into 4 chapters, and all of the other are divided into 3, which makes it a total of 25 chapters. Each chapter is divided like so. You have first chapter. You have an illustration at the beginning of the story. There's only going to be 1 per story. Each chapter is roughly 4-5 pages long. As you may be able to see, the text is fully written in Korean, and some words are in bold. And these words, you find them again at the end of the chapter in a vocabulary list, the word in Korean with the English translation, and you should know that the verbs are written in dictionary form. Just above that, you have a brief summary of what the chapter was about, and then you have a few questions about the chapter to be able to see if you understood it right. That's basically it. It repeats itself, and at the end of the book you have an answer key for the questions and a Korean English glossary, and then acknowledgements. By now you would be able to notice that there is no English translations of the stories. Don't let that scare you. The stories are for intermediate. It says here on the corner of the book that this is aimed at level B1, B2, but to be honest, I just finished this book now as a high intermediate, but I saw that most people online said that this was more of a high beginner, low intermediate kind of level, and I would agree with that. The reason is that the sentences are all extremely short, the grammar is pretty simple. The only thing that you might have issues with is the vocabulary, but not that much. Honestly, it's alright. It might be quite challenging as a high beginner, right at your level at low intermediate, and a little bit too easy as a high intermediate. Now let's talk about the audiobook. So you have the same intros that in the book. Basically, it's just Olly reading those parts out loud. And for each chapter, there are 2 files. The first one is the story being read out loud, and the second one is the summary being read as well as the questions. Now, my own personal struggle with reading Korean is to stay focused on the text, no matter how easy it is. So personally, I always find it really good that there is an audio provided with, because I just follow along the text. I have tried different way with this book, only listening to the audiobook first and then looking at it with the text, or trying to read the text first and the second time using the audiobook at the same time. And I've noticed something interesting, which are that the question in the book and the question in the audiobook are different. I think the reasoning behind it is that the question in the book are a little bit more complex, whereas the question in the audiobooks are a little bit more simple because they are meant to only be heard and answered straight away. So the narrator in the audiobook just says like, after doing this, did this person go A, to the house, B, to the school? Then he waits a moment and then is like, 정답, so correct answer, B, the school, for example, right? Something to be noted about the audiobook is that it's read by a native speaker. The reading pace is extremely slow.
오빠, 나 여기에 있어. 줄리아가 다니엘을 불렀어요. 줄리아는 방문 앞에 있었어요. 왜, 줄리아? 제가 대답했어요.
You can put it up to twice the speed, but you can also slow it down at 0.2. Personally, I find that for an intermediate level, the reading pace is too slow. I think that bringing up the speed at 1.3 or even 1.5 would be a more natural reading pace, but you do what suits you. Okay, now let's talk about what I really liked about this book. The book is well thought. The vocabulary that is introduced in one chapter tends to be repeated in the other chapters, which helps with exposure in context of a given word, as well as memorization because you are exposed to it several times. And overall, the words that I did not know were indeed the ones that are in bold, for which there is a vocabulary list provided. So these were well chosen. Overall, it does what it says on the tin. So you have this collection of short stories, the breakdown in chapters is well done, the vocabulary list is well done. Although the stories are not quite as fascinating as they advertise, they are entertaining enough so that you will continue reading it. And I really like that there's an audio available because that's not usually the case for reading practice books. So on all of these aspects, yeah, top mark for the Olly Richards short story in Korean. However, there are quite a few things that I was a little bit disappointed about, and let me tell you about it right now. The first one is that you have to buy the book and the audio separately. And as somebody who has studied a lot with Sejong, Yonsei, Talk to Me in Korean, I am quite used to the fact that the audio comes for free. However, and let me break down the prices for you. So the book itself is $12.99. The ebook, if you buy it on Kindle or on Google Books, is $2.49, so this is absolutely worth it. However, the ebook available on the very website and app of Olly Richards, which is called Language Readers, is more expensive at $14.99. I don't even understand why the ebook would be more expensive than the actual physical book. When it comes to the audiobook, you can get it on Audible, where you can get it for 1 credit if you have a membership, €11.33 if you just buy it as a one-off, or you can even get it for free if you're on a trial month. However, on Language Readers, you get it for $10.99. But there is a trick. And I can share that with you because what I'm going to talk about is available on one of the pages that is visible in the preview of the ebooks on the various websites. And that is that if you buy the audiobook on Language Readers, you can use the code audio50 to get 50% off. In which case, it brings the audiobook on Language Readers at $5.50. In the end, if you're clever about it, you could get the whole thing for under €8. But if you want the physical book and the audiobook, it's going to be pretty much double that, which is okay of a price, but I still find it quite cheeky that you would have to pay for 2 separate things. My next critique would be that because it is adapted to be more simple for language learners, it is a little bit too simple and too unnatural, so the sentences are quite choppy, but as it is for intermediate learners, they really could have done more complex sentences and longer sentences with a little bit more complex grammar. And my final critique is actually the biggest one, which is that okay, let's go back a bit. I'm gonna tell you how I found out about this. So basically, in the first story, you have characters from the UK going to Korea, and they are welcomed at the airport by a person that is a friend of one of them, but doesn't know the second one, but everybody kisses hello. Like, why? Why? This is not France. This is Korea. Nobody ever does the French bees, like this, to say hello to somebody that you know, and even less so somebody that you don't know. Why? And I was wondering why such a massive faux pas within the second chapter of the first story. What's happening? But, you know, I moved on. And then I realized that out of the 8 stories, only 2 take place in Korea. But there is pretty much nothing that is culturally accurate about Korea or very specific to Korea. So in the first one, which is called Michin Bibimbap, so like crazy bibimbap, it's the name of a bibimbap restaurant. Okay, but besides this, nothing seems to be particularly linked to Korea. And I had a look at the same book, but in the other languages. And I realized that all the stories are exactly the same. It's just that for these 2 stories that are supposedly taking place in Korea, they've changed it by other countries in the other book. So the restaurant called Michin Bibimbap in Korea is called La Paella Loca in Spanish, La Ratatouille Folle in France, La Pizza Pazza in Italy, Die verrückte Currywurst in Germany, and so on and so forth. So now it makes sense, the greeting faux pas and the fact that the context doesn't really recall Korean culture, it's just because all of these stories have been written in English, then sent to different translators to be translated in the respective languages in which the book should be published. You know, they say never judge a book by its cover, and in this case it's pretty true. These 2 women in Hanbok, you're never gonna meet them in the stories. And I know it shouldn't be so much of a big deal, and marketing wise it makes total sense. It is extremely unlikely that somebody who's trying to learn Korean is also going to read all the books for German, Italian, Russian, Swedish, whatever. There are loads of languages with this series. But I was personally very disappointed because I thought, okay, I'm going to read these books and I'm also going to get the one in German and also the one in Italian. And now I'm just like, well, I can never read the rest because I already know all the stories. And the final thing that irked me a little bit about this is the fact that Olly Richards is credited as the author of this book, but neither in the acknowledgement nor the credit do they ever mention the name of a Korean person, which would have been obviously the person that translated the book, because simply Olly Richards doesn't speak Korean. Olly Richards tried to learn some Korean, but I am 100% sure that he did not translate this book himself. And even though he potentially wrote the original English stories, why would the translator not be acknowledged? When you buy, say, a novel, the translator's name is always written somewhere. So yeah, that's something I was a little bit sad about. And now let's conclude. The level would be rather low intermediate. There is no romanization nor English translation of the actual text. There is an audio but at an extra price, and my overall rating is 4 stars because I've mentioned the part that I am a little bit upset about this book, but overall I still think it's a really good read to have, and especially if you get the ebook on the cheaper platform, it's really worth your money, it's well constructed, the stories are okay. Overall, I enjoyed reading it. It is true that it's quite difficult to find reading material at the intermediate level because the books for natives are too complicated, but the books for beginner or children are just too easy. So I'm really quite happy with it. So that's it for my review of Olly Richards' short stories in Korean. If this review was helpful to you, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up because it really helps. And if you want to make sure to not miss any of my future review, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, I wish you a lovely day and happy reading!